Andre, after what happened to George Floyd, you were very public, very open about sharing your own experiences as a Black man, your own experiences with police. They were not happy experiences, and I know that you've been watching this trial so closely, like so much of America. What is your reaction to these three guilty verdicts, guilty on all counts?
I think in some respects, there's definitely a sense of relief. At the same time, and I think one of the previous guests on your show mentioned this, the fact that there were so many communities across this country preparing for potential protests or riots because in the event of a potential not guilty verdict, I think just speaks to kind of the history of this happening. Yes, we had videotape of the murder happening, but we've had many instances in the past that I'm old enough to remember, from Rodney King to Eric Gardner or others, of assault or crimes committed by police on video where for some reason, there still was a not guilty verdict. So I do think that's still something that needs to be addressed moving forward. And unfortunately, is even though there's a sense of relief, I think, in the back of my head, I wonder, how long is it going to take until, there's another instance? Is it 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 days? Is it tonight? Because it is something that is quite systematic or quite more often in our society than it ever should be.
Well, and clearly this isn't the end of anything. This is a beginning, and I wonder what it means to you in terms of some sort of call to action. Of course, we know that there are so many incredible police officers who are working so hard to do their jobs, to protect this country. And obviously there are situations like this where things go wrong. But the real question is, does America value Black lives? And how do we value Black lives? And, what would you like to see happen in this moment going forward?
Yeah, well, I think that's the interesting question that you asked. Does America value Black lives? And I think it's certain people in America do, and some people still don't. We have, public officials that won't even say the phrase Black Lives Matter, because for some reason that is, crossing some sort of red line for them. We have pundits and officials and others that talk far more often about, property loss and property damage than they do the loss of life. So I do think that is an issue. And it's not just Black lives, it's Asian lives, it's Latino lives, it's transgender lives. It's a lot of marginalized minorities in this country that I think have to fight even to be accepted as mattering or having significance. And I think that's often why we have these issues. Somebody, a police officer or any person to have your knee on another human being for 9 minutes plus shows a complete disregard or caring for the value of their life. And so I think it's something that we have to work towards. Training doesn't give somebody empathy or make them recognize a human being. So I think it starts far earlier than that.
We have seen so many outpourings through, not just this verdict and this trial, but through the Black Lives Matter movement. And I wonder how the power of that strikes you for better and for worse.
Look, I think whenever there's a medium or an avenue for people to express themselves, generally speaking, it's positive. Obviously, that can be used to propagate negative sentiment or mistruths or other things that can end up being negative. But generally speaking, I believe that's always a positive. One of the things that you see online, but also in the media, is, I think, somewhat of a false narrative where people talk about the Black Lives Matter movement being anti-police. And I just think that should be corrected. When you murder somebody and pretty much strangle them to death while handcuffed on the floor, you're not a police officer, you're a murderer. And yes, so the people that actually serve and protect their communities, I think, should be admired and respected. But I think at the same time, the people that misuse their power should be held accountable. And so to me, there really isn't a Black Lives Matter versus police. There is, civility, and there's a citizenship and humanity versus the people that disrespect that. And I just think that should be clarified, as we move forward.
Now, Andre, when we last spoke about this, I remember you saying you were preparing to have the same talk with your own child about how to deal with police as a black man in America. And I wondered, are you still preparing for that? Does this verdict change anything for you, how you imagine you and your son will be living your life?
No, I don't believe that it's going to change. One guilty verdict is not going to change the necessity for me to have certain conversations with my son and my daughter at the right time. I think there has been, I think, an acceleration in certain conversations in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement, in terms of George Floyd, um, and dealing with things during the pandemic. Um, but that does not change. In no way does this guilty verdict negate the need to have additional conversations as we move forward, particularly when it, as they get older into their teenage years and would have more instances to be alone and out by themselves or driving. So, and that's unfortunate, but that's just, I think, the reality, not just for me, but for tens of millions of other people in this country.
You are in the business of streaming, and how we tell these stories, how the media tell these stories, how the entertainment industry, how Netflix tells these stories is so important to how a nation can change, right? And I wonder if you think Hollywood is doing enough. Are the entertainment companies doing enough? Is Netflix doing enough to make sure that representation is fair and representative, in fact, in telling the right stories?
I would say there's definitely been a improvement in a positive direction over the last couple of years, in particular, in terms of more diversity and inclusion in Hollywood. Um, Not only from the standpoint of the actors and the stories, but I think equally, or even more importantly, in the directors and the executives, as well as marketing and even things that how data is leveraged to better understand audiences or reach them. And so it doesn't mean that there's not room for improvement and things that will continue on. But there definitely has been, I think, at least a concerted effort to do so, in particular the last couple of years.